Right, so it's just about two after. We'll get started. So thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Abhi Nerurkar with EPMware, and today we're gonna go through our webinar with our friends at NinetyOne Asset Management and give you a little conversation on what an implementation is like at NinetyOne and a little overview of EPMware for master data, data governance, and workflow automation. So on today's agenda, we're going to cover a short overview. We'll give you guys an introduction on our latest customer, NinetyOne, and we'll talk about the case study for NinetyOne. So we'll focus a little bit on some of the challenges that NinetyOne faced with their financial applications and how we ultimately designed EPMware and some of the challenges that we faced during the implementation and lessons learned. We'll also go through a small demonstration of EPMware and the interface, just to give you guys a little primer on what the features and the functionality are if you haven't had a chance to see it yet. And of course, at the end, we'll save some time for some question and answers. So let's talk a little bit about, what is EPMware? EPMware, it is a master data management and data governance solution. It is a cloud and on-prem solution hosted on AWS, or on-prem is also available. The code base is exactly the same. So the offering, as far as features, functionality, look and feel, you get the same exact experience. The product itself is meant for the business user to regain control of their metadata management and hierarchy sharing process. So EPMware acts as a central hub and spoke for metadata. It is able to receive metadata on the inbound side, but most of our users really use it for creating a request for metadata and putting it through a governance process where their users can log in, they can visualize that change, and they can provide a review, approval, enrichment on that change. Ultimately, EPMware finally deploys that metadata to the target application and receives confirmation of that deployment. So all in, we become the source of truth for enterprise metadata management. A little bit about our organization. We've been around for quite a bit. My background specifically, I'm the managing director and one of the co-founders here at EPMware. We started way back in 2012, 2011, I believe. So it's been quite a time building a software company. My history comes from the consulting world, Hyperion Consulting, SAP Consulting. So and so our co-founders, Tony and Devin, who are on the West Coast and couldn't be on with us today. So as far as our offerings go, of course, AWS and cloud. Consulting also is available. We always work with one of our partners in the region to provide services as well. Training and support is also available. We have a training class that's available from KeyTeach, but any of our partners are always able to do a class as part of an implementation as well. So a little bit about the company history. We started off as an on-prem solution. And the product really started as a means of closing a gap in the early Hyperion days for managing metadata. The only option that we had back in the day was either use EPMA, use Classic to manage metadata, or to use a product DRM to manage metadata. And we saw some gaps along the way in terms of how that metadata was being managed, how it was shared with applications, either in between Hyperion applications or even beyond, going to ERP or other financial applications that neither needed one subset of a dimension or an account to be deployed to many different applications. And so that's where really the idea for EPMware was born. And what started off as kind of like a joke in a conference room really ended up being a full-fledged software company. So we're happy to be here. And, now in 2021 and beyond, we're adding, a variety of different connectors, adapters, and applications to connect to for integrations. Right. So we'll talk about the root cause of some of the issues that we see here for metadata management. Really, it's being able to create accessible, accurate, and trustworthy data to the business user. And what we see is very commonly, a lot of users are creating requests for metadata where it requires a bit of back and forth between the technical teams and the business teams to get that metadata right. So you might put in a request and find out that you need a description change, or you need a member in an alternate hierarchy. And so this causes quite a bit of back and forth between the teams, and issues or errors can occur in that metadata process. So what ePMware does is it allows that metadata to be sourced and properly enriched and governed, which actually does increase the primary reason is creating trustworthiness for that metadata, because ultimately the last thing that we want is to have disparate results in our financial applications. So a few ePMware customers, you can see that pretty popular for Hyperion metadata management. We've done quite a few implementations now on EBS as well, SAP as well, and of course, third-party applications or interface tables can always be looped in. I'm just going to talk over this slide right here. So traditional request process, again, is, as we said, end users log in, create a change, and of course the flow of requests will go to a variety of different users. Ultimately, towards the end, ePMware has the capability of deploying that metadata out to a variety of different applications. So you can create a change once, and then towards the deployment stage of ePMware, it does push that metadata out to many different applications in one app, from one ePMware application and one ePMware request. So you really get the central visibility and trail. So typical architectures for ePMware are allowing users to log in and actually create change in ePMware. Applications, applications can either feed dimensions into ePMware, or users can actually log into the front end and actually author change. Now ePMware goes through a workflow and governance process, and then finally we'll push that metadata out to target applications. Now, one of the key differences here is that we manage that metadata connectivity using a supported ePMware adapter. And that's something that, we'll talk a little bit about, the folks on the line from NinetyOne and from AMOSCA today about how that was specifically leveraged. But what's different between us and other applications that are out there are that we support these target integrations and the connectivity. And what we see is a lot of folks will typically spend a lot of time during their implementation process focusing on building the integration to the target application, instead of actually focusing on building the validations and the governance process within their master data or metadata management solution. So we'll show you some examples of that during the presentation as well. Some of the target adapters that we deploy to, of course, all the Hyperion cloud and on-premise applications are supported. Now as EPMA is going away, we do have the capability of very quickly replacing EPMA. Of course, Oracle, ERP, NetSuite, Workday, SAP, OneStream is a latest addition to the suite as well. And of course, interface tables and flat files are always an option. So you can manage the source metadata, but you don't have to use the supported adapter. You always have the capability of just deploying to a file that your downstream application can quickly pick up, and then use your existing automation process to load to your target applications. All right, we're going to jump real quick into the ePMware interface, and I'll give you guys a look and feel for what ePMware looks like. And then I'll be done with all of my sales stuff and we can move on to the good stuff. So here real quick, on the left, we've got our dashboard and we've got all the variety of modules. I'm not going to get into too much detail on this today into the modules. You guys can always go to the website and we can get through a demo. But here you can see that we've got a variety of different requests that are available to the end user when they're created. So as a user, when you log in, you'll see that metadata as soon as you click on this request. Here, you're able to visualize the workflow of metadata, of review and approvals as the metadata gets from its initial starting point all the way to deployment. You can see here that we're deploying to 2 different environments, UAT and production. So you can layer in multiple different types of environments as well. And of course, from here, you can see, who is pending approval downstream in your workflow process. So creating a request is pretty straightforward. You just log in and click create a request. You can pick a workflow or one can be picked for you. And let's go in and we'll pick a application. Pick a HFM application here. And you can see that we can simply log in, visualize a live production hierarchy, and then we have the capability of interacting by right-clicking and taking a series of transactions. Now, production capacity, this is where we would allow users to come in and create changes to the hierarchy, and security will be layered in to allow them to properly create transactions where they're allowed to. Once they create a member, it'll show up right here, and that member will show up in red. So until EPMware actually deploys this member out to the target application, it'll exist here in red, and it'll give you the difference between your production hierarchy and in-flight changes. Once you're done, you can simply submit this into the workflow. We've got a variety of different ways to get metadata in, bulk upload, etc. But again, once this is submitted into the workflow and the workflow process actually kicks off, you can just click on approve and reject as a user who comes in to approve this request. Now, this process just continues on until it's ready for deployment to either UAT or production or both. All right. So I'll kind of stop right here. Again, if you guys want to see a little bit more, there's a lot of information on the website. There's always a demo that you can book with us, and we're happy to help you guys visualize what your application hierarchy would look like in EPMware. All right. So now we'll kind of just get back into the presentation, and let me just get into my full screen mode. All right, and today we're going to start with an introduction to our systems integrators from South Africa and from the UK. So on the line today, we have Bruce and Gavin. So Bruce, I'll allow you to go ahead and do your introduction.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everyone, for joining. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think the meat of the presentation is about NinetyOne's implementation. But I'm the country manager for AMOSCA based in South Africa and was responsible for the sales process with NinetyOne. And as AMOSCA, we're an EPMware partner. And Gavin is our principal consultant, who was the person responsible for working with EPMware and with the NinetyOne staff to actually implement EPMware.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. Hi, I'm Gavin Hogge. As Bruce says, I'm principal consultant at AMOSCA, where I'm sort of the lead for the mainly the S-Base and planning team. I started out sort of quite a while ago in the chemical industry, in finance systems, moving into business intelligence, where I came across a product called S-Base, and then moved on into consultancy. And I've now been with AMOSCA for 10 years. And in my time, I've worked on a number of, quite a few different business intelligence and S-Base and planning projects, where metadata management has always been interesting and a challenge. We use DRM and EPMA in various incarnations, but was drawn to EPMware mainly due to its sort of simplicity and the fact that it is highly customizable. But I'll hand back to Bruce now just to give you a quick update or a quick overview of AMOSCA, and then speak later on in the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, so just quickly about AMOSCA. We're an enterprise performance management consultancy. We are based in the UK, but we do provide services worldwide. And as I mentioned, we also have an office in South Africa where we have a number of South African customers. And key for us is providing financial and management reporting solutions to our customers. And our focus is purely around Oracle EPM solutions, that being both Hyperion EPM as well as the Oracle EPM Cloud solutions. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I think what's very key for us is that since 2009, we've been awarded the Partner of the Year award in the UK from the Oracle User Group. And what is interesting with that is it's an award that's voted on by the actual users, not by any of the Oracle or any of the principals like that. So that's a huge achievement for us. And 7 of those years were actually gold awards. And another key one is that we actually sit on the EPM advisory board with Oracle as a subject matter expert. So we have a very close working relationship with Oracle around the EPMware products, which gives us a lot of leverage and a lot of inside knowledge as to the products and the expertise that we then have within our teams. Next slide, thanks. Basically, there's 4 areas which underpin our business. So just quickly going through what those 4 areas are. So the first one is software. So we obviously sell and provide software. And as I mentioned, the key one being the Oracle EPM products around Hyperion EPM, EPM Cloud, as well as analytics. And then we also have some complementary software solutions like EPMware that we also support, which adds value to the Oracle set of products. We then do services along with those products. So we do implementations and services around all of those various software products that we support. And we also build solutions. So some of them are very tailor-made solutions, things like transfer pricing, tax reporting, regulatory reporting, etc. So we don't only just do basic implementations, we do have some bespoke solutions that we do. And then underpinning all of that is our support. So we have a support center based in the UK, which is a dedicated support center that provides support to our customers around the world, both on the implementations and on the software, etc. So we act as a first line of support. And we provide all types of support, anything from very ad hoc support to full admin type support services to our customers.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. So now what you guys have all been waiting for, we'll jump into presentation. And today what we're going to discuss is NinetyOne Asset Management. And we've got on the phone with us today, Angela Ferguson and Alison Kennedy. And, you know, we're glad to have them on, and they've been really awesome in helping us present EPMware at NinetyOne, and, you know, prior users of Hyperion DRM and the other metadata products. So we're glad that, you know, they have the faith and trust in us to present EPMware as a solution to manage metadata between PBCS and between ERP Fusion. So without further ado, Angela, I'll let you come on and introduce yourself.
Thanks very much, Abhi. Yes, we've enjoyed this partnership with you equally, with both AMOSCA and EPMware. It's been really a fun project for both Ali and myself. And while we are a small team, we collectively have a lot of experience. So before NinetyOne, which I've been at for 5 years, I was with Investec for 18 years, and Ali was with Investec for 11 and been with NinetyOne for the last 2 years. So together we know how we work together, and we've worked on a whole lot of products that were when we were with Investec, which was JDE and S-based planning, DRM, reporting, a whole lot of things there. And then now with NinetyOne, we were Oracle ERP Fusion, and obviously the PBCS. And with those, having implemented those, we then went with the EPMware side. So you can go to the next slide, please. So just what NinetyOne is, or who NinetyOne is effectively NinetyOne is a founder-led global investment manager with over 100 billion of assets under administration. And it was initially founded as Investec Asset Management, an independent entity within Investec. And in March 2020, Investec Asset Management demerged from Investec and rebranded as NinetyOne and independently listed on the London and Johannesburg Stock Exchange. You can go to the next slide, please. So if we look at I guess our history and why we went with Oracle ERP, ePBCS, and then in turn EPMware, given our background, where we were all previously Investec, the whole stack was an Oracle stack where we had used JDE as our actual ledger and Essbase as our main consolidation reporting tool, planning for our budgeting and forecasting, and then we had DRM embedded in there on the Hyperion side, but it wasn't linked to the JDE side. And when the demerger took place, and we were then in the position that we needed to look for a new ledger and a new reporting tool, the natural selection was to go with the Oracle suite of products, as that was the most familiar for us, particularly around our reporting. So our natural choice was then Oracle Fusion ERP and PBCS, and we implemented the structures initially thinking that we wouldn't necessarily require a DRM or DRM equivalent, as we were quite a small environment and we should be able to manage them. But that quickly became apparent that it was too much for us, and we needed to look at some way to manage our metadata, and we'll get into more of those exact examples as to what the steps are and what led us to go that route in the slides to come. In addition to that, we also have Excel tables, which are basically our mapping tables for each of our dimensions, which we manually maintain at the lowest level of our metadata, so the bottom level of our account structures, our company structures, our entity structures. And we use these SQL tables to then create a template to generate a journal, which previously was in a JDE format, to convert it into a Fusion format for the system to consume, just to make it an easier transition for our users to move from JDE onto Fusion, with having to learn the new structure and the new string of accounts and what it all looks like. And at the moment, those tables are manually maintained. And the reason I'm bringing it up here is because in our future plans, it's something we'd like to use EPMware to assist us to automate a lot further. So with that in place, I think we can move on. Yes, thank you. So Ali, I think this is coming to you. You can jump in.
Hi, everyone. Abhi, you can enter a few. I'm going to talk to the whole slide.
Sure.
Thanks. All right, so as Ange mentioned before, we initially didn't feel like we had a need for a metadata management tool, but quickly realized with approximately 600 changes a month, doing it in 2 separate places became very time consuming and error prone. With Fusion, we were maintaining everything via spreadsheets, then had to import that into the system, flatten hierarchies, and then publish. And on the PBCS side, we did directly on the outline and then had to do immediate refreshes. Otherwise, our users got errors if they were retrieving. What this meant was that there was longer change request times. Also, we were doing manual validations, which meant things like attributes or adding members to shared structures were missed, and that caused reporting issues downstream. We also had no audits of any changes made, and a big problem for us was that our Fusion and PBCS structures became out of sync very quickly.
So Ali, just a quick question for you. How did this impact your ability to load data into these applications?
We could do it, but it was very manual, very time consuming. And as I mentioned, like, things were missed. So you could add a member into the right place in one structure, but you'd miss it in the next, and there was no validation. It would just slide. So reports were then wrong at the end of the month, and would have to redo changes. Yeah,
not fun.
Exactly.
Cool, I'll jump over to the next one.
Right, so in came EPMware. We could then make changes in one place and deploy it both to Fusion and PBCS. And because we could then make the changes in one central place, both Fusion and PBCS are now in sync, which means that our users can report directly off Fusion or PBCS, whereas before they could only do off PBCS because Fusion was transactional only. Where are we on here? Right, so we created validations in both Fusion and PBCS so that error making is now almost impossible, which leads us to fewer reporting issues due to any hierarchical errors. The HR file. So one of our dimensions in both Fusion and PBCS is our staff codes. We get a file from HR each month, and before we used to have to go through that file and try and figure out who was new and who wasn't, which isn't too technical, but to figure out if there were any changes. So if someone's names change, if they changed locations, all of that we had to figure out as well. EPMware now imports that file for us and does all the changes for us. It is literally a 2-minute exercise where it was a couple of hours beforehand. We also have now these immediate deployments to both of our target systems, which is great. So it's direct deployments into Fusion and PBCS, and we have audit reports to track any changes that were made that we didn't have before. Right, so our current workflow isn't exactly, we're not using EPMware to its full potential at the moment. We still get our requests via email from our users, and us as administrators go and do the changes in EPMware itself. Then the validations will get kicked off, and then it gets deployed into Fusion and PBCS. Ultimately, we would like to put the proper workflow in place so that we get rid of that whole email part of our workflow.
So, Ali, question for you on the workflow process right now. Your requests come in from your users from Excel files, or do you have like a SharePoint process?
We have created forms in Excel. So depending on the dimension request, there's a specific form for that. And yes, it gets emailed to us, and depending on the change, it either needs to be approved by someone or not. And those approvals then are attached as well.
Yeah,
so
and I should know that,
manual part of it.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, just go.
Yep. And so what I was going to say is, this is a popular way for implementations to kind of start for EPMware. I mean, there are some folks who kind of jump in and they say, we can go ahead and do the workflow and the deployment to manage metadata all in one shot for EPMware as a project. But some folks do take the option of minimizing the amount of impact that they're going to have on the target application by just saying, look, we're going to allow our administrators to continue manage the changes and to continue to receive changes to their architecture just by simply starting by allowing the admins to create the change in EPMware. And so once they have some stability there, what they'll do is go into a secondary phase where they'll allow the power users or more relevant users to log into EPMware and then allow them to kind of offload that process of Excel files in SharePoint. So definitely two different ways to look at it, but you can choose what you want based on the amount of impact that you want to the end users.
Yes, so for us, the accountants were always happy with the email approach. The need for EPMware came from us as administrators, because for us, the pain was doing everything in two different places.
And also the recons, because you didn't know which one was out or which one was wrong, the inconsistency of the descriptions, things like that. So
yes. So what we started doing was that the PBCS structure was the more accurate one, and Fusion, we just kind of stuck it anywhere because it was such a pain.
Cool. Sounds good. I'll just pull all the bullets out.
Yeah, this is Gavin's slide.
Yeah, this is Gavin's slide. All right, Gavin, you're up.
So some of the challenges we faced with, during the course of the project were, as Ali alludes, we had differences in the hierarchies between the two products, between PBCS and Fusion. PBCS was considered the master the master of the two applications or technologies. And one of the requirements was to synchronize the hierarchies in Fusion with those in PBCS. Now, one particular hierarchy, it had significant differences. It had, in PBCS, there were over 5,000 nodes, whereas in Fusion, there were around about 3,000 nodes. And this was principally because, as a legacy from, sort of historical legacy from DRM, the fewer levels have been implemented in Fusion than in PBCS. So using a hierarchy rationalization report, we were able to synchronize or to export a report that allowed us to identify all the differences. The report produced or enabled us to then create a bulk upload, which we'll look at in a minute, that allowed us then to match and all the required changes and actually auto-generate those required changes, such that we were then able to use the bulk upload to reload back into EPMware to synchronize the hierarchy and build out the additional levels into Fusion.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, Gavin. I think just to kind of elaborate on that, this is an example of one of those hierarchy rationalization audit reports. And what this really does is it allows us to pick one application and another target application. And it does the compare between those two reports. And the output of this report tells us, if I want application A to look like application B, what do I need to do? And typically in most solutions, what you get is you get a result of what's different, but you don't get a result of what you need to change in order to make those transactions occur. So typically users will take a report like this or the output that gives you the differences and then actually go in and, one by one make those changes. But what we do is the output of this is actually a list of transactions with the bulk in a bulk upload format. So it tells you line 1, move parent A to parent C, or move member D over to parent B. And it goes down the list to allow EPMware to automatically create those transactions. So as soon as we load that bulk upload file into a request, it'll automatically give us a full list of transactions that we can immediately deploy. And that, it saved us a ton of time, right, Gavin?
It saved a significant amount of time. And what was really impressive, and from my perspective as an implementer, is when we went into this project, this report didn't exist, but it was developed and created by the dev team during the course of the project. So coming out towards the end, when we were actually at a position to synchronize the hierarchies, it was ready and available for us to then do the hierarchy synchronization and go live. So no, that was really useful to have such a sort of dynamic turnaround.
Yeah, thank you. We keep Devin on his toes.
Indeed, yes.
Let him sleep at night. Right, so validation, I think Angela or Ali, you were in.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
Right, so in terms of validations, we've got unique validations per dimension, per application to enable anyone to ultimately create a request without making errors. So as an example, in our entity dimension, if you add a lowest level entity, it has to be a max length 5. Then you have to complete properties for its company, its ledger, its management reporting structure, its function and region, as well as adding it to a shared entity structure. And without doing those, your deployment will fail. So we try to make it like as foolproof as possible that anyone will ultimately be able to make changes without making mistakes. Right. Okay, so in terms of dimension mapping, so we chose to start any request in PBCS as our primary structure, and that gets for any additions, moves, or changes, and those get mirrored in our Fusion structures, and that's for all common dimensions between those two applications. A caveat to that is our product dimension. So where we in PBCS, we prefix our products with product space. So if, for example, we needed to create product 100, we'd go create it in PBCS as product 100, and that would get mapped to Fusion as just 100. So all of that's automatic, which is really cool. And also like we don't have to remember to take the product space out or add the product space in. It's all done automatically.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on the technology behind this, there's two ways to architect this, and the most popular way I would say is what NinetyOne did, where they were able to choose a target application or choose a application as the, we call it like a leading application, which drives change for other applications. There are ways where we can create a master hierarchy just by combining all of our application metadata into one hierarchy and use that as the leading hierarchy for change. And that seems to be kind of like the traditional method, or, in the Hyperion speak, I guess, it's like the kind of like the old school DRM method to be able to create that change. But I think the trend nowadays is to use one of our existing applications as a driver for change for other applications. And the reason we do this, and the reason we also recommend doing this, is ultimately when your end users want to interact with this application and create change, it makes it a lot easier for them to take a look at this hierarchy that they're using on a daily basis in their reports and in their analysis, to be able to understand and to visualize where that change is. Right. So here you can see that we've created entity 1, 2, 3, 4, and that rolls up. But you can, behind the blur, there's a little bit of like red and gray, and it shows you exactly the change that you're creating and where exactly in the hierarchy it's going to roll up to. Right. So in this request, line number 1 was created, but then lines number 2, 3, and 4 were automatically created by the application. And just like Ali said, it was created in the format that was required by that target application. So that's kind of where we allow the dimension mapping to drive the automation behind the scenes.
All right, then in terms of deployment, so for each request, when we hit deploy, it pushes to both Fusion and PBCS. We've got 2 types of requests. So we've got a scheduled request, which would then deploy overnight, as well as a rapid request. So if any of you have worked with accountants before, no one likes to wait for anything. So 98% of our requests are rapid, which means they deploy immediately. And I think one of the benefits of having us as administrators looking after this is that we know if there's something running on one of our target systems that we can't run it at that specific point in time, which helps with if there is any failures. And another nice thing is once the deployments are completed, we get emails, an email for Fusion, an email for PBCS with an attachment of everything that's been done in that request, which is also really useful.
Yeah, and Ali, like before, I really did not get my hands dirty with a lot of Oracle hierarchies and structures, and I was really surprised like how difficult it is to create a member in a hierarchy in Fusion ERP. Right.
It is, because you create it in one place, then you've got to add it into a hierarchy in another place. Then you need to flatten the rows, flatten the columns, then publish it. And that whole process for one simple change can take you like half an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just nuts.
Even, like coming from the Hyperion world, where you can just go into EPMware or a classic app and just create a member. And then, even if you're using flat files, just load that file up. It was, kind of straightforward. So I was surprised. Again, it's ERP, of course, it's definitely more complex, and depending on the dimension that you're adding, it adds that whole level of complexity. But, we're glad we were able to get in there and deploy this. But to be honest, like I didn't even understand really, the level of pain that there was in Fusion until we really started, rolling up our sleeves and, I saw this and how much of an issue this was. So no, I'm glad you guys were able to benefit from this.
Us too, believe me.
So the next one is validations with the logic builder. So Gavin, I'll let you kind of take the lead on this one.
Thank you, Gary. So yes, so a very powerful feature of EPMware is the logic builder, which allows the creation of custom logic, which can be executed at different points within the workflow or during the creation and maintenance of the metadata. So in the specific example that I'm going to sort of discuss today, we had an additional alias table in PBCS that had specific requirements. So the alias table was used by quite a few of the dimensions. And on some of those dimensions, the alias or the required alias format was a concatenation of the member name and the default alias. And on other dimensions, it was the same as the default alias. Now, this could be, this sort of particular requirement could be met by using a logic script that was triggered when the alias name was edited or entered, such that as soon as the save was performed on the alias, the script executed in the background to populate the code and name alias with the required in the required format according to the dimension. However, there was an additional twist and challenge to this particular requirement. So you can go to the next slide, Abhi. Sorry, Abhi, next slide if you can. So perfect, thank you.
Yep.
So in the so for two dimensions, for the account and the entity, the requirement stated that the member name or the alias format for code name should be different according to the level. So for account level or account leaf members, the alias was member name and default alias, and just default alias for the parent, whereas for entity it was the opposite. The opposite was true. So at the point of adding the new metadata, we didn't know whether a node that was being added was going to be a leaf or a parent level member. So to derive the alias correctly, we created a second script that was triggered when the request was submitted into the workflow, and that then executed and checked to see check for new members on account and entity, determined whether they were leaves or parents, and then again set the alias accordingly. And you can use Logic Builder pretty much at any sort of at any stage and to support many different actions. So the mappings that we've discussed previously and property derivations can all be driven with Logic Builder, as well as through configuration settings. So giving you a lot of flexibility within the deployment of the application.
Yeah, which you've become quite an expert on in the past few months, I believe. Right?
Yes, growing expertise.
Right.
But yes.
Yeah. No. As Gavin said, I mean, it's the Logic Builder is really one of the most powerful features of EPMware. Like we allow users to create scripts and attach them to various events within EPMware, and here you're seeing them as validations, and they can be triggered in real time or at specific events within the workflow. So for example, here we're triggering them when a user like Ali or Alison or Angela are interacting with that metadata and creating the request. So it's real time. It prevents any issues or any errors from actually entering into the request to start. But you may have an instance where you may want to delay this validation to run at a given stage within the workflow. And that's where the event that you attach that script to really plays a role. So you can say, look, I want to validate certain properties and entities, but I don't want to validate them until a given user logs in to provide their enrichment step on that request. And that may be 3 or 4 stages down the workflow line. So we would simply apply that script to that given event. Now, we can do the same thing for, in addition to validations, we can do the same thing for mappings or custom scripts, which will reach out to lookup tables or interface tables and provide, different levels of transformation on those hierarchies. So there's quite a variety of different customizations you can do. And as you can see here, it's full form logic that you can write and execute. So as long as you can think up what that logic is and kind of lock that down, you're able to apply that and create quite a bit of automation in terms of validations and governance on your metadata. So it's, personally what we recommend is if you can write the validation and if you can enforce it on your users, do it at real time point of entry of the request. It really creates a much better solution. It requires a little bit of training and adjustments for the users to be able to conform to the new governance that's being placed upon them. But ultimately what they do is they learn what the metadata is and how it should be and what rules it has to follow as it flows through EPMware.
Okay, so the benefits for us. So Fusion and PBCS hierarchies are now in sync. And I know I've been talking about that a lot, but the reason why that's important to us is that Fusion comes with its own inbuilt airspace cube. And previously that couldn't really be used that much because the structures were such a mess. Now the accountants can use that cube or PBCS and PBCS for their reporting because they are now the same, which is great for us. We've reduced our overall metadata processing time from about 75%, which is massive time saving for us. And since we've been live, I think we went live in July, we've done about 620 odd deployments with multiple changes within each request. So we've done a lot on it. We really love this tool. The accountants use the audit reports to track changes that have transfer pricing impacts, and an overall increased trust in our data and metadata.
And moving on to the future enhancements, we would like to put the end user workflows in place. So we would like to have that whole thing where the user, and probably we would limit it initially to super users, where they would be able to initiate the request, get the approvals done, and certain of the users to even add to the hierarchy. So we would like to get that workflow and more of the approvals and all of that automated. Adding the integration to the SQL tables, which is what I alluded to earlier with our the creation of our Fusion journals based on the format of the JDE journals. So to keep the maintenance of those mapping tables automated, we'd like to link that to the bottom level of what's sitting in EPMware. And then Salesforce integration, this would be a big one for us. Salesforce is used by the front office, and it's actually where all our structures generate from. So the changes are actually made in Salesforce, but with nothing else in mind. So they don't really think about finance or the downstream use of those hierarchies, but they actually dictate what all the other hierarchies need to look like. So what we'd like to do is have EPMware as the source, so that all the hierarchies are done within EPMware, and then use the adapters to feed Salesforce, to feed ClickView, to feed Planning and Fusion as it already does. So for it to be the go-to for all of our hierarchies and all of the management, to reduce all the duplicity that carries on at the moment around managing and maintaining the hierarchies.
Sounds great. We're looking forward to that.
You might not be, Abhi. if you thought getting the Fusion and planning stuff aligned, wait till you see the Salesforce.
if it went like phase one, I'll take it in a heartbeat. So also we're just wrapped up the presentation, and you feel free to type your questions into the chat box or into the Q&A button down in the bottom of Zoom, and we'll take any questions in the meantime. So we'll give you guys a minute to kind of just find where those buttons are in Zoom. A lot of us are using quite a variety of different products nowadays. Down at the bottom, if you hover, there's a little button called Q&A. And in that button, you can click on that and you'll be able to type in some questions there. So I'll give you guys a minute to go ahead and enter any questions you may have. Yeah, and in the meantime, I'm just looking at the attendees list and glad to have a lot of familiar friends on. Andy, how you doing? Good to see you guys there. So we got a first question here saying, how long does the implementation take? And again, I'll answer the question for general EPMware implementations, and of course, comes with a grain of salt depending on requirements, of course. But I'll give you guys an idea of what we generally do, and then Angela, I'll pass it over to you to talk about the length for
Sure.
91. So typically for us, we say a very, very light project. Sometimes if you want to do something as simple as just, add one application or add a EPMA application, and as you're doing the upgrade to 11.2, that can be as quick as, several weeks. Through the use of application imports, it's really like a one-click process to get your hierarchies loaded up. And when you do that, and when you register an application, you can very easily now create the integration to the outbound application. So that whole process, it really is, it takes a few hours or less. Sometimes it even takes, less than a half an hour to really get up and running. So that allows us to focus on the governance and the validations and, that aspect of the implementation. Again, that can last anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to get through some testing cycles and get the product up and running. If you talk about a full-fledged implementation where we're going to do data governance for a variety of applications, cloud, on-prem, third-party applications, interface tables, we can go up to anywhere like 12 to 14 weeks. I think has been kind of like on the longer side. Now again, that's really more like a complex application integration. It involves lots of mapping, application mapping, property mapping, and integrations. But again, the core focus of our integration or our implementation really is on creating the right level of governance and validations in the application, taking the knowledge that happens right now from your admins, where they're manually creating or running all these validations, and then applying that through our dimension mapping, property mapping, and validations. And Angela, I'll let you talk about 91.
Sure. I mean, Abhi, Gavin and Ali, you can step in here. But I mean, so we did have a little bit of a delay because of our structures that we tried to align. So we didn't, there was a point where we had to go, it sort of took longer than we had anticipated because of the fact that we needed to try. And it was more on our side. It wasn't because of EPM, where it was because we needed to figure out what we needed our structures to look like and force in sync. But I mean, roughly it was about 2 months for us to get it from beginning to end, to get it in. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I think we were about 8 weeks.
8 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, in total. And yes, and then that included the hierarchy alignment.
Yes, the hierarchy alignment of both the systems and the full automation of it. Yeah.
Again, we always talk about the rationalization can be a component, and so before you take on any master data or metadata management project, really understand your hierarchies. And what the relationships are between those hierarchies and how the change impacts each of them. So
when we started,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, when we started, I was convinced that only one of our dimensions was out of sync. And then Gavin started sending these reports through, and I was like, oh, goodness, we didn't have one dimension in sync. We had to fix everything before we started. So,
Ali, don't feel bad. That happens on every project for us. Everyone says like, oh, it's perfect. It's totally rationalized. And then, we run those compare reports and we're like, this doesn't exactly look right. So I got a few questions came in. I'll just jump through those real quick. So question, next one is, does EPMware have its own native users, or does it utilize a user base from another source? So great question. We can very easily pull in users from your LDAP. Of course, on the cloud, we support SAML 2.0. And I think later than that also. But again, you can have a mix of native users and your SSO users as well. So, just like any cloud application, login and single sign-ons fully supported, whether you're on-prem or on the cloud. Next question is, can Oracle customers download an EPMware trial version and set it up themselves, or do you need some implementation help. So you can have a trial version of ePMware. Our recommendation is that you go through a trial process using your metadata. Now, ePMware is easy enough where you can open up the admin guide and pull in your applications very easily and get up and running with it. We do a proof of concept for free, so we can take your hierarchies and load them up into ePMware. And then as part of the trial, you can, roll your sleeves up and create some requests, but at least we'll be able to walk you through some of that process to be able to understand exactly where to go, where the buttons are, and, what areas to focus on. And part of that proof of concept also allows us to point out areas that you should focus on given challenges that you're facing within the enterprise, within your enterprise right now. And I think that's pretty important, because as you use the product, and if you feel like it's making enough sense and you want to build a business case behind it, that POC really serves as validation that what we want to ultimately accomplish and the level of complexity within our organization can be achieved using the POC that we've completed. So again, yeah, go ahead.
Just comment quickly. And one of the other advantages of the POC is it gives you a chance to an initial review of the hierarchies in your target applications, because there are definitely benefits to be had if you can do some preparation work to tidy those up prior to importing them into ePMware, because it makes the synchronization and mapping and sort of actual management that much easier during the course of both the implementation and the transition to go live.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you nailed it, Gavin. It's, again, I said it before, I'll say it again. It's not an ePMware thing. It's every single application, every single product faces the same thing. You need to understand your hierarchies. You need to understand where making a change in one application, how does it impact every other application? Understanding that relationship will create a smooth implementation. So again, folks always ask us, like, what prep work can we do? It's always, if you're using ePMware, you can use the compare application hierarchy reports to understand where the differences are and where the deltas are. And then even that gives you an opportunity to actually do a cleanup process. So you don't have to use our reports to generate that change. Obviously, it makes life a lot easier if you have a large amount of changes, but you do have the capability or the time before we start an ePMware implementation to simply rationalize those hierarchies manually in classic mode, or using whatever product you're using. Right, definitely makes implementation a lot easier. And then the last one, how much training was needed before 91 admins could start using ePMware on their own? So, Ali and Angela, I'll let you take that one.
So we did the Key Teach training, which was a one-day course, which was very, very useful. But I think the benefit came, especially for me, was that we were very hands-on on the project. So Gavin and I were on the phone all day long doing stuff together, and I tested it to death. So I think that a lot of the learning came in with that.
Yeah, your testing was very thorough, and yes, and we were challenging each other during the course of the project.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So fixing, understanding, and resolving issues. It worked really well.
Yeah, definitely. The big takeaway is, if you can commit resources to the implementation, again, please do so, because it allows you guys to hit the ground running, especially when you get through UAT and when you get towards cut over to production. You know exactly what's where, what validations or what scripts are running at what event, and it allows you to troubleshoot with much greater ease. All right, so Angela, Alison, Gavin, and Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure working with all of you. And I think, folks on the line, thank you for spending an hour with us today. And if you need some more information, please check out epmware.com. If you're interested in a trial or a POC, just check out the contact us page and put in your info. So until then, we're going to sign off and hope to hear from some of you guys soon and work with you in the future. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a great day.
Thanks, Abhi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Everybody.
Cheers. Bye.